Halo Tribuners, selamat datang di wawancara khusus bersama saya Reina Sukmawati. Hari ini saya kedatangan Associate Professor of Film and Associate Dean International and Engagement in the Faculty of Arts and Education Deakin University di Melbourne, Australia, yaitu Miss Victoria Duckett atau Ibu Victoria ya saya panggilnya. She's here with us now. Dan pada hari ini kami akan membicarakan nih tentang kedatangan Ibu Victoria yang pertama itu untuk merayakan 10 tahun anniversary Festival Film Australia Indonesia, dan juga akan berbicara banyak mengenai industri perfilman Indonesia tentunya, dan juga karena Ibu Victoria ini juga punya interest di virtual reality dan artificial intelligence atau AI, kita juga akan bahas tentang itu semua. Hari ini perbincangannya akan seru sekali. Jadi here it is, Ibu Victoria. Halo Ibu.
Hi, yeah, good.
You can say some bahasa Indonesia maybe that you already learned, like
Selamat pagi.
Selamat
But
pagi.
it's morning. It could be afternoon. What's
Yes,
afternoon?
selamat siang.
Okay, selamat siang.
Selamat siang. Selamat
Selamat
siang,
siang.
Ibu. Thank you so much for coming here. It is such an honor to have you here because it's a very interesting topic that we're going to talk about today. It's about movie, it's about VR and AI. But before that, I want to know more about you first. The audience also need to know more about you first. So what are you doing here in Bandung, and how long have you stayed? What are the activity that you already done here? You can tell us more about that first.
Okay. I arrived in Bandung this morning on the
Okay.
Whoosh train,
Okay.
which I really enjoyed taking. I'd never taken that before, so
Okay.
that was a really great experience. A lovely way to arrive in a beautiful city.
Okay.
I came here to speak with students at the Deakin Lancaster Indonesia campus,
Okay.
which is in Bandung. And it's actually really special to be here and to have been able to visit that campus, because I was here 2 years ago and it didn't exist. And this year it does exist, and I came here as part of Festival Cinema Australia Indonesia, which is a terrific festival and forum which creates, or I hope creates, bridges between countries and creative people and educators and just general people,
Okay.
using film and media and creative industries to do that. So it's a really exciting way to connect with people, really.
Okay.
And so I came thanks to Festival Cinema Australia Indonesia, and it's their 10th year, which is absolutely terrific.
Yes.
Like, it's amazing.
It's amazing.
And I've actually watched it also from Australia, because I can't always come and be part of
Yeah.
it, expand. So this year, in its 10th year, it visited 10 cities. And
Yeah,
one of the
yeah.
cities, of
It's
course, is
Bandung,
Bandung.
yeah.
And so this is my first, stop to talk with audiences here. But there's been a terrific array of films. There's 5 Australian films, 2 Indonesian films. I believe there's also a masterclass, Australian Awards filmmaking
Yeah.
class run for students here as well, and they liaised with Griffith University. And so that kind of exchange, not only in seeing amazing film products from each nation which are connected to Australia, so the Indonesian films also had some kinds of Australian connections
Yeah.
that we can talk about, but also having the educative part of the festival, I think,
Yes.
is really meaningful. And they screened the students' works before the feature films too, which provides a platform, a meaningful one,
Yeah.
I think, for younger people.
Yeah.
So, I can't speak highly enough about Festival Cinema Australia Indonesia and the opportunities it provides for people like myself, but also for just community
Yeah,
to go
yeah.
and watch films. And and they're free.
Very free.
You get to go to the cinema,
Yeah,
and you get to
for free.
watch for free, and you get popcorn.
There are-
And
How many total films that will be shown?
they're all up. There's 7 films in terms of the feature films, and I'll just say the titles. 5 Australian films, which is The Dry, Lost Tiger, which I'm particularly excited about because Chantal Murray is the first. It's the first Australian animated feature written and directed by an Indigenous woman. So that's
Okay,
and
it's
so this
very
program
interesting,
is
yeah.
very meaningful programming.
Yes.
There's also Runt, Late Night with the Devil, and A Royal in Paradise, which was built upon a famous novel that I've been reading up about. So
Okay.
with Indonesian kind of connection.
Yeah,
So, you know,
okay.
there's these films are chosen for a reason, and if you look at the cast and crew, or you look at the genesis of the story, or you look at the story that's being told, or who's
Okay.
telling it, there's a really interesting framing going on in
Okay.
terms of reaching out and communicating with Indonesian audiences.
Okay.
And the Indonesian films, which you might, at least one of them you'll be able to pronounce better than me, is Mencuri
Raden
Raden
Saleh.
Yes.
I
okay.
love that movie. I
Yeah.
watched it like 3 times.
Yeah. So that one, and also Heartbreak Motel.
Heartbreak Motel,
which,
yeah.
which
From
was
Ikan Natas, from the novel of Ikan Natas.
Yeah,
The
and that was
infamous.
much easier for me to pronounce that one. But yeah, so a really great array of films, and I am here to run, because there's masterclasses associated, so there's always kind of embedded learning and outreach, which I think is also really great.
Yeah.
And so I'm here in my capacity as the director of the Deakin Motion Lab, which is a kind of, it is actually, it's not a kind of, it's a lab which works across VR, AI,
Okay.
virtual production, and it's a collaborative generative lab which has a whole lot of researchers and students active making things.
Okay.
And so today I had the opportunity to go to the campus, the Deakin Lancaster Indonesia campus, and present to a whole range of students from high school and universities about the kinds of projects we're doing with artists,
Okay.
with First Nations people, with industry as well. So I tried to show a little bit of the creative side, working with the
Okay.
National Gallery of Victoria, a little bit of the work that was done that the Festival Cinema Australia Indonesia also allowed us to bring last year
Okay.
a planetarium film,
Okay.
which is really
Great.
unusual.
Yeah.
So last year we showcased The Earth Above, and that shows Indigenous stories
Okay.
and from 4 locations, distinct locations in Australia. And it's an animation using Unreal Engine, but also using footage taken from actual Indigenous sites
Okay.
and telling the history through animation of
Okay.
those sites, which I
Okay.
think resonates
Yes.
with
Yes.
Indonesian
with
audiences
Indonesia.
in terms of the
Okay.
importance of Indigenous populations.
Yeah.
And yeah, also industry, like you think industry, but it was like workplace training through AR, augmented reality and virtual reality. So we can talk
Yes.
about that after, but that I wanted to show the fun stuff,
The
the kind of training stuff,
Yeah.
and also to kind of show the meaning of the kind of meaningful engagement with new technology.
Okay.
And the students, I must say for the Bandung students, I'm sure the
Mm-hmm.
Jakarta and everywhere else students are great. They were really great and engaged and
that was-
asking questions.
Those I was going to tell you is Bandung is one of the most famous about the artists, like be it filmmaker, artist, singer, musician. There are a lot of Indonesian famous artists are coming from Bandung. So I want to ask you the question that I want to ask about was what do you think about the students that coming to your class?
I was so impressed. I am so impressed. It was a really, really full audience. It just looked like every place was taken. They listened, and I wasn't sure because, I'm talking as I talk, in English. I get excited. I talk really, really fast. So, I'm running around with the microphone, animated. And the students were like, they were listening, they were following everything, they were engaged. And then when I said, okay, let's ask questions, in the end we had to stop the questions.
Because there are
there's
too many.
And it was really meaningful for me personally because I'm always trying to encourage the participation of women in this space.
Sure.
And the men, great, they're there, But a lot of younger women had really great questions about creative process, about how we made things. And I was really struck that a lot of the questions weren't about how did you actually do this? Tell me the technology. It wasn't all the hardware. It was what's the meaning? What's the purpose?
Okay.
And I love that because I feel like we can all learn Unreal Engine or, we can all learn how to engage with these platforms. But it made me really aware that the students here are asking themselves, what are they going to do when they get on that platform? What is it that I want to say? And that especially as a teacher too, really struck me because I just thought it was so exciting for me to understand.
You see a lot of aspiring filmmakers there.
Maybe filmmakers, but mainly storytellers, because that's what I kept on saying. It's like,
Okay.
it's no point having all this technology if you don't have something to say or
it's
do.
yeah,
Yeah?
I agree. So it's everything start from here, right?
Yeah.
They start from here. They want to tell the story, like not only the story that's already been told, but something meaningful to them. You find something like that in the class.
and I got that sense that they were kind of saying, well, you know, what could I do, or how, even things like not just what stories, but how can I make sure the stories I want to tell are accessible because of price, because of access. And I thought, I was like, I don't know, you tell me. And you're young, go and do that, please.
They sound so ready already.
Yeah, they were just like, they were great. And I just felt the questions really made me realize, or just reaffirmed my kind of faith in younger generations, or the feeling like, you know, I feel very middle-aged sometimes. I feel old, right? I saw the internet arrive, right?
Age is just a number.
I know. But not thinking aesthetically, but thinking pragmatically.
Okay.
You know, I'm the generation that saw, you know, I was trained at UCLA. I was part of the generation that first used the computers creatively in the 90s. I was at the Hypermedia Lab. We were the first to ever render, you know, all the kind of films that would take, it would take 24 hours for 3 minutes of animation to render, right?
Okay.
And I was with Lev Manovich and people like that who have gone on to have very big careers in that space. And it was so exciting, but it was so kind of select. It was so small and no one else was doing it. And no one in Australia was yet doing it. And you felt like you were kind of, you know, on the edge of things. And then I'm old enough to have seen the change. And so being old enough to understand what it meant to learn and have to know how computers work, and the excitement of seeing more and more people pick up cameras, the thrill of knowing your telephone can be a camera, right?
Yeah.
It can do all these things. But also, you know, the excitement today of realizing that the next generation, or even more, like you might be, whatever, like, you know, generations, are picking up the challenge and understanding the importance of media, of storytelling, of what you're trying to say to people. And that was really reassuring for me because, you know, I research and we do all these really cool things. But if you don't have that exchange between, it doesn't have to be age. It has to be, you know, it can be whatever. It's not always old or younger. You know, we learn from the younger people, but it's also about, having that, that kind of reassurance that you're all on the same page and you've got the same questions and you understand important stories are.
It's really good to hear your impression to Indonesian student storyteller. I mean, it means that we will never lose hope of, you know, the future of the storyteller in Indonesia, be it a filmmaker or a series maker, because Indonesian people love watching movies, basically. So maybe we have a lot of them in the future telling their own story that meaningful to others, right?
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. It's like, I mean, I did say, well, everyone, you know, everyone's got stories to tell and anyone could tell them now. We've all got access to do that, right? But you actually need to be doing it collectively too, like you're in groups telling stories, and it's a community thing, and you know, it's that sense of how are we going to work together in this new landscape, and what are we going to make, and you know, these are the new tools, and everything's changing. So how are we going to? What are the stories we're going to tell using these new technologies?
Especially in the VR and AI era that we're gonna talk later.
Especially in the VR and AI era, because it is a new one.
Okay, but first I'm gonna ask you about how familiar are you actually with Indonesian movie? Have you watched one, or maybe there's one movie that actually imprinted in your heart, something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm familiar, but not so familiar. It's been questions of access, especially generationally access. So, you know, I am familiar, and I did want to highlight, there's one director in particular who I might mispronounce, so hopefully, so Muli Surya, is that right?
Muli Surya,
okay, great. And I suppose in a way I wanted to highlight her work, number one, because she works I mean, she's also been in Australia, so in a way, and she's quite verbal about how important it was for her when she went to Australia and what kind of experience it was to be on her own there and to learn a different way of thinking and looking at the world.
Okay.
And she came back and she's made a lot of important works. But I think it's a bit odd, but to always think about pioneers, and I don't mean to say, oh, wow, she's so pioneering, but she was the first Indonesian woman to have her film screened in the Directors' Fortnight at the Cannes Film Festival, and that was with Marlena the Murderer in Four Acts.
Oh, yeah, I love that movie.
Yeah. And I think, first, I love the Four Acts, and I love that part, the kind of anthology film. And in a way, I think it's one thing. And so in a way, I mean, when we did The Earth Above, it's in 4 stories too, you know? And I kind of feel like either it's my attention span. I really like Instagram, you know.
Me too.
Yeah.
Don't be ashamed about it. A lot of people.
Yeah. No, and I think that's great. So I think it's that episodic way of building a story within the one structure, which I really like. And when I looked the film up just before I came in to talk to you, I was like, oh, I mean, I knew that she's won all the Indonesian awards, but I think it's the Citra Awards, but she hadn't. I didn't realise she'd won the Cannes one, and I don't mean to think, oh, just because you win a Cannes, that whatever, like you don't need the European validation, because she's terrific. But I kind of think that has to be acknowledged.
Okay.
And I think that that's really important. And also her recent film, which I haven't been able to see, which I do want to see, The City is a Battlefield. Perang Kota. Yeah.
I haven't watched that. It's just released.
It's just come out. Yep. And it was the closing film for the Rotterdam International Film Festival, which is significant as well. And it's a different genre. And it's the first time too she's got a male protagonist, which I think is interesting, because she is a feminist filmmaker.
Yeah,
you know?
she is.
And what I found also interesting is that she works so closely with her husband. And so I think that partnership, creative partnerships, at least in the kind of Western film history that I grew up in, it's always been silenced. It's like Hitchcock and his silent wife that enabled him to have such great scripts, right? And when we hear her talk about her filmmaking, she's always talking about her husband and the importance of that partnership and the importance of having someone there that she can fight with, but also working through. And I think often we forget about the intimate people that creative people have around them, and she's so good at highlighting that, and I found that significant. I like that about her. And the other thing, because I'm interested in what's happening today, but I'm also interested in what happened before, like in film history. And so, because film history is really like where, especially the beginnings of things, the edges, is where a lot of experimentation takes place. So when film first emerged, you know, you had live performers, you had live music, you had film, you had painting the films, you had all this crazy stuff all together. And I was looking at Indonesian early film, and I know that a lot of that was under Dutch, impact. And I thought, I came across, because I was looking at the iFilm Institute in Amsterdam, and there was a conference there about a year or two ago, and it drew my attention at the time, and I'll read the name just because I don't memorize it. Ratna Asmara, who was the first Indonesian filmmaker as a woman, who made a film in 1950, which is just once the Dutch leave, right? You know, so fresh in terms
5
of the
years
change.
after.
And the Dutch physically left in 49. You know, So she literally, the first thing that happens is that film gets made. And her filmmaking career has been lost. But there are 2 scholars, Umi Lestari and Lisabona Rahman, who are digitizing her films, and they found a 1952 Dr. Samsi film, which was based on a play written by her husband Anja Asmara, who's important for the theatre. And I think that's as interesting as whatever's going on now, is that you have scholars and young people and youth interested, travelling overseas, making sure that not just your future of film, but also your past of film is being restored and digitized. And I think that's that's only happened in the last few years.
Yeah, so I agree with you. I like the way you highlight all these women in the filmmaking history in Indonesia because there's some I love Ika Natasha too as a storyteller. I read her novel, and also we have Mira Lesmana, a lot of women in the filmmaker's story, and I think I agree with you that this woman's side of the story in the Indonesian movie history is very important, right?
Yeah, I mean, as much as the men, it's just that it hasn't been told.
Yeah, it hasn't been
and
told.
so it's about ensuring that future generations understand, not just that they were present. It's not that they were absent and suddenly now people are making films. It's that they were there.
Yeah,
and that's important, I think.
And they have more access now comparing to like 50 years ago.
Yeah, you think of your parents. Oh no, I would be your parents' generation. Don't think of your parents' generation. You think of your great grandparents' generation. But the important thing, I think, it's understanding that all of this, the film history and what we're doing today with media, it's all interconnected, and it's not that one's back there and let's forget about that and now we're just going to do exciting stuff. There's a real history and there's a history of people being involved.
Okay. So what do you think about Indonesia movie nowadays, especially because maybe I find it really interesting, maybe ever since like 2000s-ish, Indonesia really love horror movies. And it's really hard to bring movies that telling story like Heartbreak Motel, or maybe the Marina in 4 Act, or maybe I Love Dua Garis Biru, the one that I really love too. It's really hard to make it into, let's say, box office because the ticket selling was always been let's say dominated by the horror movies. What do you think?
Okay, I mean, I will ask you in a minute about the horror movies, but I do know, like, as someone who teaches film, that the 1970s was very important for horror movie in Indonesia, and that's when that genre really took off. And I also know, because I have just arrived here, and thanks to Festival Cinema Australia Indonesia, yesterday we also had a terrific conversation with Mr. Doni. He's the director of, I'm going to get the title right so I will read, of Games, Film and Animation in the Ministry for Creative Economy. So thanks to DFAT we were able to go and talk with him, and it was so interesting to hear not just his reflections on, okay, Indonesian film has been dominated by horror, but also for him to say, well, there's also war dramas, there's literary adaptation. People are changing the stories that are being told, but maybe you could tell me more. Could you tell me a little bit about what you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting, especially this year. The animation movie called Jumbo just released, and it actually make like a phenomenon especially in social media. People like they call themselves voluntary buzzer for Jumbo. So other people can watch it too. So other people can come to the cinema, even if they give away free tickets for the people who haven't watched it. So I think it's a very phenomenon because it hits the grassroots, if you know what I mean. It hits the grassroots, and it's very rarely happen in Indonesian movie history. As long as I live, as long as I remember, I have.
As long as you live in all those years.
As long as I remember, come to the cinema for the first time. Even the Avenger Endgame has. They never had.
What were they called? Buzz? What did you say? The people who were
voluntary buzzer.
Voluntary buzzers.
Yeah, because buzzer is such a thing in Indonesia, so they call themselves like buzzer for free to help the home production to promote the movie. They do it in social media a lot, actually, especially in X or Twitter and TikTok, also Instagram. And now Jumbo has surpassed the #1 horror movie, the most selling horror movie, the KKN in Desa Penari, and it's the most popular, most selling. It's 10,000 and 10 million viewers, and Jumbo surpassed that in like 3 months.
That's amazing.
That's why. How do you see that?
Well, I mean, to be honest, Mr. Doni was talking about that yesterday as well, and he was saying Jumbo was like, absolutely amazing in terms of that audience engagement. And as someone from Australia where number one, we won't have that many people. It's hard to get people into the cinemas. We're looking at a lot more people looking at streaming. They're looking, you know, they're always watching at home.
Okay.
And I was just so impressed with the kind of culture you must have here or can build here around audience engagement. That's about bringing people together in front of a film. And when you're in the cinema, it's a different experience, isn't it? Than watching at home.
Sure.
Or on your phone.
Yeah.
And first, as a film scholar, I say it's more cinematic. Yeah. Even though that's probably wrong to say. It can't be more or less cinematic just because of the apparatus. But I do think that having an audience together in a cinema, nothing beats it.
Yeah.
And
It's
every
a
audience
very
is different.
Different. It's
Yeah.
a different feeling, different, you know, different experience,
Yeah.
you know, with the sound, with the people watching it, you know.
Yeah, and the noise or not noise or the phone going off and not going off, you know, all that. And it's kind of like the liveness of the audience. I mean, in Melbourne, we were like the most locked down we could be during COVID, yeah. So for 2 years, shut down. And it's been hard to get audiences back into the cinema.
They get used to the streaming platform.
Yeah. And I think what I was so kind of so encouraged by what I heard yesterday and now what I'm hearing from you in terms of people's willingness and not even just willingness but wanting to go in to share the experience of something which is watching a really meaningful production. And I think that's about building community, isn't it?
Yeah, it is actually. Yeah.
And I mean, who would go, like in terms of people watching, that means everyone's going.
Everyone's going. Their parents, of course, they're gonna. If the kids want to watch it, of course, the parent needs to go with them.
Yeah.
And the parents also take their parents, which is the grandparents of the kids, also to the cinema. I watched it once in the cinema. I brought my little niece.
Oh, sweet.
I went there, and the whole family actually went there. The mother-in-law, the kids, everyone coming, and I think it's very interesting because even. I mean, KKN Desapreneur, of course, it's segmented to 18 plus audience, but yeah, I think it's very interesting because firstly, it's animation movie. Indonesia has never been into animation movie before. The last one I remember was Juki. I think it has about 2 million audience, and now Jumbo. It surpassed the Avengers Endgame and every like Western movie that ever came here.
That's really great. And I think, I mean, there's 2 points you make there. Like you're talking about intergenerational watching at a time in which so many people have been talking about the splintering of community because of media, right? And saying, you know, too much foreign content, at least in Australia it's American content. Or they're saying, I mean, I've got 2 sons and one will watch there and the other one will watch there and I'll go and watch here, you know. And it's like, can't we just watch something together? And unless I'm watching soccer, we can't. So I think to have something that brings not just communities together, but actual families, you know, it's an intergenerationally, not just with the younger children, but with the grandparents, is really significant. And I think that you kind of think also in terms of animation. I mean, I will mention quickly in terms of the work we do in the Deakin Motion Lab with the virtual production. Okay, so virtual production, that's when it's like green screen, but kind of exploded, like, you know, really, and you've got your LED volume. And the way you build the landscapes and the worlds is through Unreal Engine, which is a game engine, right, that you're using to build the animation. And I think I'm always saying to students and saying to anyone who'll listen, it's all animation now. Film is animation. You know, even the film that you think is an animation, when it's using virtual production, it's using animation because they're animation effects that build the environments we're seeing. And so I think that's, I mean, it's a cultural shift in what we're looking at, which I like animation. And it's also a shift, it indicates a real shift in terms of different processes of how we're making film when we're using virtual production. So animation sits at the heart of virtual production.
Okay, so virtual production, animation, and now it's really good to talk about AI because AI lately has been used to make animation. I've seen I've seen some institution or something use AI to advertise advertise themselves, with AI. They barely use artists now. So what do you think about that, especially in filmmaking, in the future, and especially now because we're already in the era of that? How do you see that?
Gosh, big question. I think it can be used in a really positive way. It can be seen as, I'm going to start with the good, right?
Sure, for sure. We should.
So I think it can be generative. Okay, so when someone's thinking about building an environment, and they're working visually, which a lot of creative people do, so if you can just say, okay, I want a landscape, Russian 19th century landscape inside of court with crazy hairdos, you will get that, and right away you can start adjusting that. And I think to be able to have that quite quickly,
it's very helpful.
It is helpful, right? Okay. And I do know, and I was talking in the class this morning of I do know of filmmakers who literally are almost going mad with excitement because they can generate all these things, and it really helps them, and it's just like a playground. So I think in that way, the same way I'd say to a PhD student writing a thesis, you can use ChatGPT as a prompt. If you've really got writer's block and you can't think of another word or way to phrase something, sure, but that's not writing your work. You have to have the intelligence to ask the right question. So in the optimistic framing, you would say that, all the capacity that we now have to also just create animated, videos, everything, is a real enabler for people who can't otherwise do that or couldn't otherwise build those sets or don't have access to a volume, a virtual production volume, to have those cameras and film, right? But on the other hand, there's lots of on the other hand, isn't there?
Sure.
Yeah? What do you think on the other hand? What's your
people in the internet, especially artists, being worried because firstly, of course, their field are being chased by AI, and now they're worried about how they can make money. For sure, make money is very important for artists. They're not making arts for free. For sure, I support artists. And also, a lot of people saying too that AI is very lack of, lack of soul in the making of it. There's a lot of people saying that, right?
There's no empathy. There's no real engagement.
When you see an AI generated picture or video, you can immediately tell it's AI because you can connect somehow to the art. So
So it's I mean, what you've just been talking about examples of audience engagement, right? And how excited people are. So the question then becomes, why or how can they be engaged with an animation?
Could there be something like that in the future? Maybe what people worrying about is gonna be blurred in the future. Like, one day we're gonna see an AI generated art, let's say generated art with more soul. Then are you worried that it will actually take out the artist's space or something?
I mean, there has been a bit of, in the press last year in particular, there were cases being reported of especially voices being so all the voiceover for the animation films or whatever, they'll get to episode 30 and then suddenly they lose their contract and the next 25 episodes are made with an AI, which is basically a clone of their voice, right? And they haven't had any legal recourse. There's been no way that they can claim or get compensation. And there's been a lot of unethical behaviour in terms of you get employed for a contract to do a certain amount of episodes, and then they say, we don't need you anymore. So as the artist, you think, well, that's just because they've run out of funding, so I'm really sorry, fine, because that's the kind of industry it is. And then you find a year later that actually they've just got AI to backfill. So that poses a lot of questions, and for creatives, I think really it can be very unsettling and it is a real concern, I think. But on the other hand, so far, what we've seen in terms of AI generated content, if you're trying to build an entire film out of that, you can see all the problems.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
the
it's
idea of you don't
action.
engage. There's no real empathy.
Yeah.
Transitions don't work, cameras, everything. There's just so many problems
yeah,
with
yeah.
it. So you can see it for fun. Like that's really interesting. That's experimental. If you see it like that, then it's fun. But
Okay.
if you don't see it like that, I mean, if you actually sit back and think, what is this going to lead to?
Yeah. Because
Then
I remember Jumbo actually has more than 200, if I'm not wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, Tribuners, more than 200 people working on the art, working on the creative production of the movie.
200.
Yes.
That's a lot.
Yeah, there's
Yep.
a lot. There's a lot. And yeah, so yeah, it's very interesting. So how do you think how the government should actually limit the like
How do they limit what
yeah
to do? I
what to
mean,
do, yeah.
before I was talking to you, before when we were chatting, I was talking to you about how Screen Australia released its kind of guidelines, and it said, here's a set of principles that we can follow. So so far from what I can see, each nation seems to be.
Yeah.
So the national
Yeah,
border, which is not, thankfully, it's not a physical one. It's, if the national borders seem to be defining
Yeah,
approaches, don't they?
yeah.
So Screen Australia last year released a statement, and it's just a guiding principle. So it's not law, but the highlights were talent, creativity, culture, and the individual have to be prioritised.
Okay.
So that has to be prioritised. It has to be transparent when
Okay.
you use
AI.
AI. It has to be ethical.
Yeah.
Whatever we can
Yeah,
talk
whether
about. Well, we can
ethical-
talk about whatever
It's
ethical
good.
means. Yeah.
Yeah.
It diversity, equity, and inclusion has to be actively considered. Yeah.
Okay.
Fairness, so ethical fairness, responsibility and accountability.
Okay.
And they're the big headlines, and under each headline they expand. But that's a guiding principle, and you hope that by Screen Australia setting these in
Yeah,
place,
exactly.
that that's what happens. And we know that in America, like
Yeah,
they've had to
it's
really
very-
they include clauses now.
Yeah,
The Writers
very
Guild has
detailed,
been
yeah.
very active in saying, even if you use AI and the prompt is the human, well, then that's human content. Yeah. So it comes back, I think, in a way, a lot of it comes back to the questions you ask, because that's the prompt, which
Yeah.
is the human.
made.
Yeah.
Human made. Yeah.
But it's a very complex
Complex.
terrain. So you
Yeah.
tell me, where are you at in Indonesia? I'd be interested. What's happening with AI here in terms of how are people
I think
looking at it?
I mean I'm not anti AI for sure. I think it helps a lot of people working in the industry, a lot of industry, but sometimes when people doesn't get it, or maybe because we don't have the right regulation by now, maybe in the future we'll do have. So
Yeah.
like for the spreading hoax and something, using someone's pictures for sexual harassment
yeah,
online,
yeah,
something
yeah.
like that. It's like wrong use
Yeah,
here. So
yeah,
I hope
yeah.
the regulation and the limitation should be dropped soonly, so we can have like the right navigation to where the AI should lead. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because yesterday Mr. Dhoni was saying how in South Korea they're not allowing it at all in the
Okay,
film
okay.
industry. And I thought that's really interesting.
Yeah,
Because, we're looking at the litigation in America. We've got these guiding principles in Australia which don't seem to be working that
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
And, it's a really, it's a terrain that's, we're watching it unfold as it unfolds.
Yes, yeah, let's see.
Yeah. And that's before we talk about sustainability.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
I think it's 10 seconds of AI generated content
Yeah.
is 1 hour of the microwave. That's one very hot cup of tea.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Ibu Victoria, I really love talking with you, but your personal assistant is already 5
Yeah.
minutes
Yeah.
more.
Good.
So, okay, let's make last questions for you. Is what are you how are you gonna tell our aspiring filmmaker or storyteller, especially in Indonesia, especially in Bandung, in the era of AI? What your message will be for them?
I suppose what my message was today to the students was find your story.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because, they really have to think of what's important for them and what they want to achieve, what's the message they want to get out to an audience. And what I think, from what you're telling me about the audience engagement and participation here, it's really great because everyone seems to be thinking
Yeah.
socially and in terms of the community good. So find the story and then use the AI in the ethical, responsible way
Yeah.
as an augmentation of filmmaking, but not as the sole
Yeah,
parameter for what
yeah.
you're going to do. So go for the story. Yeah.
Go find your
Go
story,
find your
Team
stories.
Tribuners. So yeah, that's our conversation
Thank
today.
you so much.
Very interesting. I really engaged to the topic. I didn't realize that we already talked for like 40 minutes now.
Wow. It felt,
It just felt like whoosh.
Yeah, whoosh. Like whoosh, yep.
It felt like whoosh. 40 minutes, right? 40 minutes, right?
40
From
minutes,
Jakarta
right?
to
Yeah,
Bandung.
we could have kept going. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, Ibu Victoria, thank you so much
Thank
for
you so
coming
much.
to our
I appreciate
studio.
being here.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really looking forward for your work in Indonesia. Maybe next time.
Come back.
Maybe
Yep,
come back
absolutely.
here.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, so let me say goodbye to the Tribuners. Terima kasih banyak telah menyaksikan perbincangan wawancara khusus kami pada hari ini. Jangan lupa jika kalian masih pengen baca-baca informasi seputar Tribun Jabar lainnya, bisa langsung aja cek di tribunjabar.id, tribuncirebon.com, atau tribunpriangan.com. Saya Rena Sukmawati, mewakili seluruh kru yang bertugas, pamit undur diri. Sampai jumpa di wawancara khusus selanjutnya. Dadah!